On the bustling streets of Karachi just 50 years ago, a daughter of the nation was born. She pursued the path of knowledge and faith, embracing the world with her humanity and reaching the highest scientific ranks. She began her life with a privileged childhood, excelling in her school to become a brilliant academic whilst being very active in charitable work. That was until she became a prisoner with no name. Prisoner 650. This is the story of Dr. Aafia Siddiqui.
My sister Aafia is my younger sister, and she was born in March of 1972. Well, we were a small family, upper middle class, educated. Our atmosphere at home was all about education, learning, and helping others. So, we would be trying to do a sadaqah, pick something from the floor, help someone, hold someone's hand, because it will be a sadaqah and this will be very high and this will get us very far in both lives. So Aafia was the youngest and she was very brilliant. She was a genius and she was really brilliant. And she always was at the top of her class. I put pictures of hers. Here she is, going to school, and then there's her with her dolls, and then with her doggy Shaggy, and then this is with Mr. Lesulu, the Prime Minister of Zambia. Yes, Aafia stayed with her brother in Texas, and that is why we let her go before she got married, because our brother was there, and Aafia stayed with our brother, and she went to University of Houston.
In the early 90s, Aafia gained a scholarship to study at the prestigious MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, graduating with a degree in biology in 1995, and there she started a new chapter in her life filled with knowledge, education, and generosity.
If I show you see this whole file, this is one part of her whole academic certificates. Just certificates and report cards. You see all of these. There's so many of them. Full bag full of them. Certificates of merit. All these 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see all of these. Her entire. This is where she learned Arabic, and this is her Bachelor in Science degree from MIT, and then these are all her transcripts. You can see this is her Brandeis degree. She did very well, mashallah, and she got a full scholarship to MIT, and mashallah, and then she went there, and she finally did her PhD. And her thesis, her master's and PhD thesis, was on how children learn.
She was the head of the MSA for the greater Boston area. And both myself and my husband was at MIT at that time, and I was a student at Wellesley College. We met her. She taught me how to set up a table at our student center. She came over all the way from MIT and helped us set up a table for Bosnian orphan children.
She was a Hafidha Quran and an Alima Quran. She did all the Alima courses, and but that was the religious thing. But her love for education was far beyond that.
She memorized the Holy Quran entirely, reciting it regularly.
So I really looked up to Dr. Aafia Siddiqui as a woman who was very confident in her Islam. She was a practicing Muslim, someone who wore hijab. I didn't wear hijab at that time, and I never really met anybody like her who was so brilliant, smart in the dunya life, in the worldly life, but also somebody who was extremely prompt and punctual in her salah. She was somebody who's an ideal Muslimah.
In 1995, she got married to Dr. Amjad Khan over the phone in an arranged marriage, and he joined her afterwards in Boston, USA, for a simple wedding. Dr. Amjad began his medical training shortly after. Soon after the birth of her son Ahmed in 1996, her friends and family noticed that the usually bright and full of life Aafia was calmer, and signs of sadness began to appear on her face, as well as bruises of violence on her body, as she struggled to make her marriage work. While pregnant with her daughter Mariam, things got worse, and Aafia gave birth in 1998. Both children are American citizens. She remained a committed Muslim woman as she juggled her volunteering job as a teacher and studying to obtain her doctorate on the one hand, and raising her family with ideal values on the other hand.
To the park, she would even take my children, and she had very good time management. She managed to do things better than I did.
In 2001, Aafia obtained her PhD in neurosciences from Brandeis University. She did not know that this year her life would change dramatically. It is the year that witnessed the horrific events of September 11, the start of the global war on terror, and a series of tragic circumstances that would engulf Aafia too. The war on terror was a war on Islam, under the pretext of fighting terrorism, and resulted in destabilization, death, and destruction.
Yes, absolutely. Post 9/11, the September 11th tragedy, the United States government did engage in a systematic campaign of violating the rights of Muslims, both here in the United States and abroad. There are many lessons in history that provide us with this clarity that to oppress and wrongfully, and so I feel a special obligation as a Muslim male to do everything in my power to secure the freedom and repatriation of Dr. Aafia Siddiqui back home to her family where she belongs. This, as an American, I'm ashamed that my government did something like this to an innocent Muslim woman. After finishing her studies in 2002, by March of 2003, she was targeted for rendition. She was kidnapped along with her children and disappeared based on nothing more than the suspicion that she had ties to terrorists.
The vast majority of Americans have no idea who Aafia Siddiqui is, and they don't care. And unfortunately, as Americans, and I speak as an American, and I get to apologize for an awful lot of things that we've done, but we've got 6 million people either in prison or under threat of imprisonment in the US. That's an enormous number. And Aafia, to the Americans, is just one of those 6 million, and she's totally forgotten. And as far as the US is concerned, it really is a prison industrial complex. They spend enormous amounts of money on prison.
Aafia was one of the first victims of this war, and she was wanted for questioning for the simple reason of her husband ordering night vision goggles online. But she was never charged for terrorism nor accused of it. At the end of the same fateful year, her marriage to Amjad ended, when she was still pregnant with their son Suleiman, who was born thereafter in 2002 in Pakistan and therefore holds Pakistani citizenship.
This just in, you were looking at
de mayores
Aafia Siddiqui, Pakistan में पैदा हुई.
apparently a plane has
Siddiqui, 37, was found guilty of attempted murder.
Outstanding neuroscientist, Dr. Aafia Siddiqui.
They're trying to seize themselves.
Today we've had a natural coronation.
The events proved too much for Dr. Aafia Siddiqui to handle, so she decided to return back to her birthplace in the hope she would find comfort and safety there.
I feel quite dejected because it's been 15 years. I've been linked up with the case of Dr. Aafia Siddiqui since 2008, since the news broke. So it's been 15 years. If I could put it on paper 1, 2, 3, what are my achievements? I don't find much. Yes, I did create a lot of awareness in my neighborhood, in my institute, wherever I worked, about Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, but does it translate into some practical success? I don't think so. And in my school, all the children know about Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, and because they're young minds and impressionable, and you can make them understand things, so they are all very practical and very active about Dr. Aafia Siddiqui.
As soon as she set foot in Pakistan, she began to work on education and trying to achieve her dream of building an Islamic school for children as the war raged in neighboring Afghanistan.
So Aafia had a passion for education, and her dream was to start an educational system and an institute where children would learn not just to read and write, but to be able to make their own decisions, to be able to be well informed, to know what the Quran is all about, to know what the Bible is all about, to know what the different religions are all about, to know what sociology is all about. She worked for that. She applied for land, which was approved for her, and she was taking that institute that she was forming to make this educational reform. It was like an evolution, an educational revolution.
Soon after, the governor of Sindh at the time, Mr. Mia Sumro, promised her 40 acres of land to build the school she had dreamt of. And one day, on March 30th, 2003, she set out with her 3 children to Karachi airport to travel to Islamabad to meet him. But she never reached her destination. She was kidnapped with her 3 children on her way to the airport.
So she was taking that to Islamabad, and that was that unfateful day that unfortunately she was kidnapped and she never reached Islamabad.
The next 5 years were a nightmare for her family, who struggled to find out her whereabouts and what had happened.
Well, I mean, your answer is as good as mine. There is no response to why. Ask Ahmed Rabbani, who's just come back from Guantanamo, why? He keeps asking why. There is no why. There's no answer. There was nothing. 20 years suffering.
With the profile of Dr. Aafia Siddiqui, can get picked up and kidnapped and gone missing and taken into custody without any valid proof of any kind of terrorism, then all kinds of so-called Muslims studying in religious educational institutes and in any kind of religious activity, they're all under the under the eye of the agency.
Human rights organizations were searching for the truth until news began to circulate about her from the notorious Bagram prison.
We receive threats off and on all the time. If I make some statement they don't like, I get a threat. When I wanted to do a press conference about Aafia, we received a lot of threats. Sometimes they drop some dead bodies out our home. The Pakistani government is an interesting framework. So the politicians, obviously, Aafia's story touches the heart of the people. It is universal in appeal. So, everyone feels her pain because it's the pain of a simple Pakistani person. That is the worst torture anyone can do in the world, and that has been done to Aafia. On top of that, everything else that they have done, as bad as it is, nothing could top her not being able to see her children not being able to see their mother.
There were some accounts of former detainees who had heard the screams of a woman in the prison, but no one took responsibility for her fate.
I spent a lot trying to uncover on investigation, especially the International Justice Network and Tina Foster, to find out what happened, why Aafia, the why question, the $1 million question.
On 7th July 2008, Cage International held a press conference in Pakistan about Aafia's disappearance a few days before the US government alleged, on 17th of July 2008, that Aafia was captured in Afghanistan. Then, on July 30th of 2008, the senior journalist Najib Ahmed, who was one of the first reporters to cover her case, published an article in which an eyewitness said he had been part of the local police team who captured her in Pakistan and handed over to the FBI. He then died in mysterious circumstances on December 10th of 2009, one day after he announced in a public meeting that the Pakistani army had handed Aafia to the Americans. The head of police in Sindh, Shaukat Ahmed, admitted in a secret recording that he took part in the kidnapping of Aafia and her children. The first one to reveal the truth about Aafia and her children's disappearance from 2003 to 2008 was the investigative journalist Yvonne Ridley.
So I was investigating various aspects of the war on terror, and I noticed that most of those who were kidnapped, renditioned and tortured were all men. And I wondered if there were any women, and that's when I stumbled across this, it started off as a rumor at first about this woman who I came to know as Prisoner 650, the Grey Lady of Bagram. I began to track down eyewitnesses who had seen the Grey Lady of Bagram in this vile prison that the Americans had taken over. I had a great deal of help when I went to Pakistan to try and find out the identity of Prisoner 650. And the person who really stepped up to the plate at that point was Imran Khan. I was determined to find out if anybody would recognize Aafia Siddiqui. And one of the people that I interviewed was the warlord Hekmatia's son-in-law, Dr. Gerhard Bahir. And he said conclusively, this is the woman that I was locked up with. And one of the first things that was done in the global war on terror was to dehumanize the detainees. And the best way of dehumanizing someone is to strip them of their identity. And you do that by issuing a number and removing their name and not referring to their name.
In July 2008, after the report started to filter through about her whereabouts, Aafia did not know that a new plot was being hatched against her. In July 2008, after her family's campaign in Pakistan had made her a household name, Aafia was one day released on a street in Afghanistan with a boy called Ihsan Ali, and was told that he was her long-lost son. She was instructed that if she took a bus to Ghazni and sat outside the Khalid bin Walid Mosque, her daughter Maryam would be returned to her and she could go back to Pakistan. As she approached, she heard the call to prayer and said, "Come to prayer, come to success," to the boy. They rushed to the mosque and waited there for several hours, but it was a plot. Someone called in that she was a suicide bomber. Meanwhile, a brave local tailor learned who she was and that she was no suicide bomber, as he was the only one who spoke Urdu there. So when 40 Afghanistan National Police people showed up with their guns, he stood in their way and would not let them shoot her. But instead, they still took her to the local police station. Allah had saved her once more from death.
Okay, the first version of what led to the charges against Dr. Aafia Siddiqui is that she was in a police commander's compound behind a curtain waiting to be interrogated. And that while she was waiting to be interrogated, all of a sudden she came through the curtain, grabbed an American soldier's weapon off the floor. Version that Aafia tells, which is, we believe, the correct version, is that she, upon hearing the voices of Americans arguing with the police, the Afghan police commander over custody, she got up from the chair that she was sitting in behind the curtain, and look through the curtain to see if there was a way to escape. The forensic evidence, there were no gunshots fired, with the exception of the American warrant officer's weapon. No other shots were fired. There were no bullet holes anywhere in the room that corresponded with the government's version that she fired a weapon, and no one in this crowded room was hit.
In a critical condition, Aafia underwent surgery in her abdomen and spent 2 weeks recovering whilst tied to the 4 posts of her hospital bed. There, she was denied visits except for 2 special agents, and under heavy medication, she was made to confess to false claims that she was married to an alleged Al-Qaeda member or to study germ warfare, which would be convenient since no forensic evidence exists to support the story that Aafia went on a shooting rampage. Aafia was brought to New York with her wounds still unhealed, with no extradition, to face charges of attempted murder. The courtroom was filled with people, supporters of Aafia, members of the government and the public. The trial lasted several days.
Excuse me, sir? I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the team you are putting together for me, and the consulate had no right to do that. I never gave anybody that right.
Dr. Siddiqui has requested many times to retain another counsel.
I'm not. Where I am, I can't find my own counsel, and you put me in such conditions? I'm sorry, I just don't agree with anyone that's provided. You can't just impose lawyers that do not represent me.
They certainly are. They are respectable lawyers. The government of Pakistan has retained at least 4 of those lawyers at great cost.
Sir, I have the right to release them from this duty and to have other lawyers take their place.
We went through many times about Dr. Siddiqui's representation on record. There is sufficient evidence on record for the court to find that Dr. Siddiqui acted with premeditation, that she wanted to kill Americans, and she wanted to escape, and anticipated the possibility of being turned over to the Americans on 17th July.
I have to clarify just one thing, sir. Thanks to God, my memory has improved quite a bit. I remember very clearly from the trial time the instructions given to the jury to give me a non-guilty verdict, but then the verdicts changed. If God forbid I'm lying, check out the records, unless they have been changed, because that happens in this court. Unfortunately, what is said is not always what is recorded. In my case especially, in the judge's interpretation of law, if I say I don't want to go with your people who have done whatever they did to me, then I am guilty, without reasonable doubt of assault and the rest of the charges. There is a verse in Quran, in Surah Hujurat, chapter 49, verse 6, which says that if you get news from a source that is not trustworthy, verify it. For if you don't, you may take an action against people and regret it later on. There are so many rumors, oh my God, and pretty much all of them are not true. I saw Prophet Jesus, peace be upon him, in a dream, and we have great responsibility, especially to followers of Jesus, peace be upon him, to tell the truth about him, because there is a lot of room for constructive talk, and when God has written for me to come out of prison, I am going to come out.
And I add here, as you said before, that you have written to me stating that you are standing for peace and justice.
Yes, sir. I wish peace everywhere.
So, I believe, regrettably, that because of the reasons that I have said, that a total punishment should be 86 years on 7 counts. Shame on this court. If you are going to make another outburst, I will have you excluded.
I just want to say one thing. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, forgave all his personal enemies, no matter how much injustice he suffered, but he never took personal revenge. I forgive the 2 soldiers who shot me. The world is just full of injustices, and I also forgive Judge Berman.
Thank you. I wish more defendants would tell it the same as you do. So are there any further objections, Dr. Siddiqui? You have the right to appeal.
It would be a waste of time, energy, money, everything due to the long list of injustices. I appeal to God and He hears me.
And as far as the US is concerned, 86 years is really not that long. It's not a death sentence, it's not a life sentence. And they'd planned to just keep her in prison for all that time, which is the rest of her life. So right now, the US doesn't care about Aafia. We've got to change that, and we've got to make sure that we can work out some way that she can be repatriated to Pakistan.
It was a proceeding that masqueraded as a trial. It wasn't a trial based upon rules of law and principles of justice. And she didn't stand a chance of getting a fair trial. Star witnesses for the government contradicted themselves under oath. They should have been charged with perjury, but they weren't. And at the end of the day, this trial proceeding that was also officiated by a judge, a Zionist judge who was openly biased against her. At the end of the day, the charges that ended up being brought against Aafia Siddiqui ended up being an admission from the US government that they didn't have evidence court case.
See Aafia in Texas in January. It was a very traumatic experience for me even, but obviously much more for her. She has been through horrors over the last 20 years. I came to see her directly from Guantanamo Bay, where I'd been visiting some other prisoners. And I think it's safe to say that Aafia's experience has been more traumatic than any of the Guantanamo prisoners I've represented, and there are 88 of them. So it's very difficult. I mean, physically, she'd had all of her teeth knocked out on the lower level in an incident in the prison. I was able to get in to see her, as a lawyer. They can't stop me from doing that. I've been a lawyer in America for 39 years, and there's no prison that's allowed to stop you from visiting a client as a lawyer. But I got to see her for 80 minutes, almost an hour and a half. And I think that was a good amount of time for a first visit.
The Friends of Aafia started doing many things. We started first with a petition at the White House website to try and help Aafia. And that first attempt wasn't successful. It was in June 2013. Then we kept on trying, and the year after, we reached 100,000 voices on the website in just 1 month. And that's really only 1% of petitions reached that threshold. But what's disappointing is we only got a reply 1 year later that they couldn't do anything about it. We were asking for the freedom of Aafia. We've been involved in many protests in the consulates of Manchester and London and Birmingham and Bradford. We've been standing, making so many protests throughout the years from 2013 till today, 10 years now, of trying to raise awareness. We've done dinners, awareness. We've invited guests like Mauri Salakhan, Yvonne Ridley. We've been to speak. We've sent letters and petitions to the consulates, to the ambassadors. We've even raised, tried to talk on radio and the social media. And today, we're trying to make a documentary to talk about Aafia.
There was a lot of manipulations that took place during that so-called trial proceeding for Dr. Aafia Siddiqui in New York City, just blocks away from ground zero.
I will, of course, also be bringing legal proceedings to try to get a compassionate release. But you have to remember there's not a lot of compassion in the US criminal justice system. We can also ask for a presidential pardon or commutation from Governor Biden. Again, you have to remember that it's tough to do that.
She was never charged with terrorism, only on attempted murder, as the court found nothing to incriminate her.
Anyone can write to her. You can write to her through me. My email address is clive, CLIVE, at 3, the number 3, dc.org.uk. You're welcome to send me a message for Aafia, and I'll get it into her through legal mail. You can do all sorts of other things. You can write stories about her. You can do art. You can do poetry. You can do anything. The only thing you can't do is nothing.
Aafia Siddiqui was sent to the notorious Carswell prison, where abuse of female prisoners has been rampant, and she has been there for the last 15 years. Sadly, her mother Ismat Siddiqui passed away on July 2nd, 2022 due to illness and the pain and sadness of being separated from her beautiful daughter during those long years. Who will stop this suffering?
I would just thank her for her courage and her patience.
My message to Aafia would be, you are not forgotten. And I'm sure that she is well aware of this, that she has not been forgotten. And she will not be forgotten.
Dr. Aafia Siddiqui will come back. I am, inshallah, 100% sure of that. But now what has happened with her, she has become an icon, an international icon for the Muslim nation. And I believe that once she comes back and she sets up her educational program, everybody will accept that educational program without any kind of contradiction or opposition, because it will be hosted by Dr. Aafia Siddiqui.
I foresee that really, I don't think Aafia will be at the first instance be able to go to Pakistan. I think the best solution now would be to get a neutral country where Aafia could go in the meantime, where she could just rest, where her family could meet her, and then maybe later, at a later stage, she would then go to Pakistan.
She is the most wronged woman on the planet. Her presence in Carswell prison in Texas is an injustice. It's a stain on the face of human rights, not just American justice, but global justice.
If at any time Aafia hears this, I want her to know that I love her and I miss her and I would do anything to get her back. And I would appeal to all the international audiences, to the US and to the Pakistanis and everywhere else in the world, that my sister is not capable of committing the crimes that she was framed for. It's a framework. I just ask you to open your eyes and to look into the case yourself. See the ridiculous and hilarious accusations. They're not even humanly possible. Please see it with an open mind and let my sister come home. 20 years too long. Enough is enough. Please show the world that there is humanity. Please give us hope. Please give the world hope that everything has not all gone down the drain, that humanity exists. Please show the world that justice does exist. Thank you.
Aafia Siddiqui. Aafia Siddiqui, we pray for you. 650, 650. These are the numbers of a treasured soul. 650, 650. Sister or mother with no child to console.
When the situation's bad and it's looking like they're winning, remember Allah sees the one who's sinning, and He also sees the one who's looking out for his women. So I'ma take the stand I should've took from the beginning, and I'ma still smile. I cannot lose in this game. Whether we live or die, they're both winning lanes. So as things remain the same, I fight for a change. Cause what kind of woman has a number for a name? When I first heard the story, I was ashamed.